There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
Incoming. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you
Hi.
so much for your patience. I know we are very behind. One of the people they couldn't wait, so we're kind of back on track, but not really. But
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's totally fine.
So you called in because you saw my original video with the gentleman who was a ex-Jehovah's Witness, and you are a woman who grew up
Yeah.
within the Jehovah's Witnesses as well.
Yeah, I left about 2 years ago, semi-formally. And it was just watching that video and just a lot of the things he said. I was like, oh yeah, no, like I grew up with the same stuff, but just from the opposite end, and just how girls are raised is really weird. And it's like you're kind of groomed and bred to be um like an elder's wife, for lack of a better word. And it's just like the it definitely makes a lot of girls turn into kind of like quote unquote pick me girls, where like male validation is just like the best thing you can have. Um and then, like, one of the things I wanted to just like talk about, because I think it's just a really interesting thing they do, is like little kids are all there to hear it. The same, there's no like kid corner, but there's this thing called marital due, which is like you can't, if you're married, you like can't withhold sex. You need to put out.
Oof.
All the time. Like, yeah,
Whenever your dude wants it.
yeah,
Ugh.
and it's really, and like they say, like they try to like backtrack a little, like they'll put things like, obviously, like, like you're not like a sex machine 24/7, but you can't like if you're like, you can't have a headache every day of the week, right? Kind of a thing.
You're.
Um
It's not that you can't say no to sex when you're not in the mood. It's just that when you do, we're probably gonna call you a tease and a whore and a slut. Like, yeah, yeah. So like, you don't have to. The choice is yours. You will be ostracized. You will be shamed for it. But it's the choice is still yours. And it's
yeah,
like, okay, what sort of choice are we talking about here?
yeah, no, definitely. And like there's the just like, I remember this one meeting I went to where the talk was about like marriage as a whole. And like it's always weird because there's like a lot, and it's also weird too just how like men in the congregation view it. They feel like, oh, there's so much that men have to do, and like women get off easy in these like watchtower studies. But it's like not, I don't really agree. Like there's this talk, I remember sitting there, and this guy was saying, you grew up watching those Disney movies about a prince who was gonna sweep you up, and that was a satanic lie. You're gonna be with this guy who you might disagree with him, but it they literally gave this illustration. Like, if you're basically like, if your husband wants to like sign up for like a Ponzi scheme, and you think it's a bad idea, and, and you think it's a bad idea, you need to just like stifle your tongue and like be like, I think that you might want to reconsider. That doesn't sound like the best thing. But if he's like, nah, I'm still gonna like put like a second loan on our house on this, you just kind of gotta be cool with it. And if it turns out that you were right, you cannot say, I told you so. That is like the worst thing you can do.
Not even that, but it's and then even if like you do that, even if you uh don't say anything when things go wrong, they're gonna be like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me why didn't you voice your opinion? It's like, because you told me not to. Like, they'll find a way to blame you either way,
Yeah,
pretty
no,
much.
I totally, there's like this whole weird, like, double standard where, like, you, the way that, like, Christian dating happens among Jehovah's Witnesses is like, obviously the girl won't make the first move, but, in a lot of ways, it's kind of it's a I mean, maybe like guys would disagree in like in the religion, but it definitely feels like guys are told that they're much more of a prize than a woman. Like you, like there's this thing that they would talk about in circles, like the 10-to-1 ratio. There's one good brother for every 10 sisters, and they're all gonna like fight to have him, and they it's like really weird when you're trying to like just sort of live your life. And I'm not like this stick figure Amazon beauty queen woman. So I was like, oh, the best I can hope for is maybe like a 40 or 50-year-old widower will love me after his first real wife.
Yeah, it's like, and it's funny because the way you mention it, it kind of almost sounds like the opposite of like what we have, where like a lot of people say it's like, oh, it's like guys are all going after the same like same women. It sounds like it's flipped. Like women are told like, hey, you all need to like fight each other for these certain guys. Um,
Yeah. It also just created a weird space where like when we were younger you could boys and girls could just be friends, but when you're older, anytime I like talked to a boy I was like desperate, and like like I was trying to like secure a man when I was really just like, oh, I found out he likes comic books, and like it's really hard to find people with like any shared interests in that aren't like being a Jehovah's Witness. So like um then then I remember like several times I was like pulled aside to talk about how like the dresses that I wore to church had too much cleavage, and how like you really shouldn't do that because it's not gonna like you don't need to do that to get guys to like you. It makes people, they'll think that you're not a good wife. If
it's
you
so,
have
and the thing is like with that stuff, it's not even that's not like that's like kind of like the extreme version, but it is amazing how much that has permeated into just secular life too. In the sense like people still say stuff like that even for not like religious who aren't even religious. They just sort of it just sort of internalized of and it sucks too because like if a woman has I we were talking about this about like Twitch and stuff like that. Like obviously like there are a lot of women on Twitch who use their bodies um to like bring in viewers. Like I personally I don't have a problem with that. It's like whatever
right.
if you got it. However, what kind of sucks is that I've seen women who like there are just women who they're just busty. They just have like like a decent sized rack and they're just sitting there in like a shirt playing video games and they're like, oh look, she's shoving her boobs in our face and it's like I think she's just existing, dude. Like I don't like it's like she just
Yeah.
that she can't help it. Like it's like are there people who like act like do like take advantage of it? Yeah. I'm like again I like okay I don't care, but it kind of permeates in the sense that like you said like oh you don't have to do that to get boys to like you. It's like well what if I'm doing it because I want to? What if I'm doing it because what if I'm doing it because I want the girls to like me? What if I'm doing it because um what if I'm not doing it for any reason? What if I have big boobs and like sorry, like I don't what do you want me to do? Do you want me to like pull my shirt up? Like I don't know. Um
Yeah,
yeah, and it gives you like you can't win really. They'll always find something to get at you for.
yeah, there's like the totally, I think like the way that like school uniforms are like boys can't look at a shoulder without like losing their mind. That's definitely the culture in there. And then there's this like I sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but like going to back to like within like the marriage and like submissive stuff, there's this whole philosophy of like winning him over with like kindness, like speaking without a word, they call it. So like, and that is really scary because you can be in like a legit abusive relationship, but they'll blame you like you're the nag, like like he like well, men want respect, and women want love. So if you were just like giving your husband the respect that he needs, then he won't do these things to you.
Wow, thank you. That is such a comforting, because it's all based around fear. It's based around negative reinforcement. If you do this, this
Yeah,
won't happen. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's just
It's
it's so dumb.
really, it's really, it's really scary because there were like I would have friends growing up who would like be interested in a boy or date a boy, and so much of like the relationship screamed red flags for me, but it's like it's what you're supposed to do. Like we need a chaperone for every date. I think he mentioned that when he on the last call, but um there were there was one time when I remember friends of mine, they had a like it was two couples, like a boy and a girl and a boy and a girl, but because it wasn't an odd number, they can't be chaperoning each other. So it must have been like a make-out orgy party or something like that. And then and I remember the guys got like a school, like, you really shouldn't do that. But then like the girls were like, okay, so like this, like we're really talked to about it, about like how it was at one of the guys' house apartment or whatever. Like these are, I'm not even talking about teenagers. I'm talking about like 20-year-olds here. It was at one of these guys' apartment, and these girls, like, they were wrong for going.
Yeah,
And
they'll
it's like,
always frame it in a. It kind of goes back to we were talking about with like the red pill. It's like uh oh, this is actually something I hear a lot that's very common in red pill. Red pill dudes will really shit on single mothers. Like they shit on single mothers all the time, like to like a really creepily weird extent.
mhm.
But what they'll always say is like, okay, but then you'll say something like, okay, but what happened? What if this mother had a kid with a guy and then he bailed? How is that the mother's fault? Well, she shouldn't have married a guy who would have done that. And it's like, okay, so basically, yeah, so basically you're just finding a way that you can blame it on the woman. That's
Yeah.
very, very. That's pretty. What's the word? That's pretty up to par in terms of a lot of these communities. They'll always be able to find a way to frame it in a way where it's like, but it's your fault. It's you should have done this. You could have done this, and not in like not in our of like a what's the word I'm looking for? A empathetic way, like, hey, like to actually like give advice to like other people, like, hey, here's like things to look out for. Um,
Mhm.
in a way of like, you should have known this, like that was dumb, like you were in the wrong, and it's like that's such a toxic, terrible way to
Yeah.
go about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like in my I also feel like just like grooming girls to be like really submissive and like super forgiving. Like that's another thing. Like every meeting will be like, don't hold grudges, don't like fester in your feelings, don't feel anything. Like don't at all. When I like even when I was like starting to like leave and find my own experiences, it really left me like super vulnerable to being taken advantage of, and not like even like not even in like a necessarily like predator way. I don't know how I really like feel about it, but because like you're told like the man's always right all the time. um I was like 18, 19 in a relationship with like a 40-year-old man who like made me like a weird secret, and also like talked about my age a lot in a way that was kind of weird. But I was like, oh, that's just like his sense of humor. He's just like, that's just fine. Um and it was like, just because the only thing you can like hope for is to like be loved by a man, that you kind of just have to take everything that's given to you in a way.
Now, is that common in terms of the age dynamic for a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses,
um
or no?
no, I mean, It's weird. One thing, like, if you even go on the videos, they do not necessarily like opposite gender, but they do promote like you shouldn't just have friends your age. You should be friends with people who are older than you because like they have a lot of wisdom to give you. And like I'm cool with like age gap friendships or whatever. But there was literally like if you're single and like automatically you're kind of like prey. Like I remember my friend and I were both harassed by the same 40 plus man. This is a different one. And we were at a gathering, like a party, but like they're all witnesses, so it's like not going to get too wild or crazy. And we were playing a board game, a group of us, and this man comes over. He tried to rub my shoulders, and I was just kind of like, oh, I'm just playing this game here. He rubbed my friend's shoulders, but because we're all like, several of us were looking at each other uncomfortably, but none of us dared to be like, hey, man, maybe stop. Like she
Well,
doesn't
that's
want you to do that.
well, that's sort of like the. I mean, to interrupt. My apologies, but like
Oh
that's
no,
sort
that's
of like
fine.
to kind of like extend that to like, oh, because a lot of people in this situation would probably ask you, or people who don't really understand would probably ask, well, why didn't you say something? And it's like you can't really ask that question unless you've understood that like, if throughout your entire life you have been basically told to not do that, to stay in line, be sweet, be nice, don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
It's not set any boundaries at all, or your boundaries are at the whim of whatever man you're dealing with.
Yeah.
When you
Like
say, well, why don't you just say no? It's like that's such a the fact that you have to ask that question shows that you're not educated enough on the subject to even be discussing it.
right. Yeah, like at one point, and that reminds me of something else. But at one point, he even was like, oh, you're so tense. Why are you so tense? And he kept like rubbing her shoulders, and it's like you're tense because she doesn't want you to touch her, but we're all just supposed to not say anything.
Oh my god! If she
But
actually said that, it's like, I don't know, maybe because there's a creepy ass 40-year-old asshole dude
yeah.
like creeping me the fuck out. Like maybe that's why I'm tense, dickhead.
And it was, yeah, no, and it was also weird too because at one point like he like because I just like after that we just kind of like stopped engaging him in conversation. Like we'd just be really short with him, like, okay, yeah, that's great, like because it's like we obviously gave him the wrong impression that we wanted those advances. It's on us, so like we need to
Yeah, of
just
course.
like
You did
we need to
something. Your shorts were too
yeah,
short. Why are you wearing a tank top? Why didn't you wear a sweat? It's like they'll always
yeah,
rationalize it, and
yeah,
that's such a not I mean in any context, but especially in this context when you're talking about
right,
abuse, sexual harassment, or
yeah,
assault. It's just that and it's terrible because it's not even sometimes something that people do consciously. It's just
right.
internalized. It's almost like their mind goes to that. It's not that they can see the situation, but then they always jump to, oh, why didn't you do this, as opposed to saying, oh, why the fuck didn't that dude why didn't this dude not do what he did?
Right. Like there's actually like literally in the rules of like, I don't know how familiar you are with disfellowshipping, but that's like when you get shunned for being bad. And when it comes to a girl, if if she has premarital sex, she'll just get disfellowship. They both will or whatever. But if she says that like, no, I did not want to. He took advantage, um they'll be like, well, why didn't you scream? You need to scream. If you didn't scream, then you wanted it. And it's like that's like in the rules. And like so that's not
Oh,
even like
wow.
so you can't even say like it's these and like they'll try to rationalize things. Like they'll like if you like Google it, you'll see all these like covered up CA cases that like they've settled or whatever. And but they'll like I remember being because I never looked at those things because those are apostate, and if you see those, like, you're bad too, and like you shouldn't let them influence you in any way that's incorrect. But when this stuff was like going on, they would like talk about it in the meetings, and they'd be like, the actions of a few imperfect elders are, we that's not the whole organization. But then you look at like the rules, and it's like if you didn't scream, you won it. like this whole vicious cycle of it's nobody's fault, you should stay in the cult, but you know what I mean, like it's just really toxic.
It's and it's
um
so funny because like you'll hear that that's like the go-to excuse, whether it's like I like when I try to talk to people about like, hey, red pill has a lot of toxic rhetoric. Oh well, it's not all the red pill guys. Hey, the Catholic Church is there's a huge problem with like priests molesting like altar boys. Oh yeah, but it's not all of them. Hey, the police department, there's a huge problem with uh, officers not being taken to task for their behavior. Yeah, but that's
right.
not all the. It's like people don't seem to understand that like it's not a matter of and this is gonna. I don't mean to sound. I'll be careful saying this. At the
Mm.
same time, with a lot of these men and boys, it's like you can say like, oh, they're just bad people. There's bad apples. If they were taught that from a young age, if they were raised in this world where this was permissible and okay, why would they think any different? Why would they? Why would that 40-year-old dude assume, oh, it's not okay to do this to these two young girls? It's especially in like a very close knit community like that, like a very tight. And this
Yeah.
is like a kind of like a religious sect. It's
Mhm.
That's why we discuss the larger picture, the institution, because we can get rid of the people who do the bad things. We can tell that guy to fuck off. We can kick the priest out. We can fire the cop. But if we don't fix the institution, this will just keep happening over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Like even though like when I talk I just think of like this 40-year-old creep, but I know it was like still like sort of not his fault. Like I feel like cuz the thing is too like just in like the experience of this particular person, he like left and then came back into the cult.
Mm-hmm.
Which like I don't know why. He kind of got a little doomsday when he came back and he was like it was weird, but he came back. So he had time being like among people before he came back. So I feel like he should have at least known because he knew like actual people. But I can also see coming back and like falling into like, well, this is how things work here, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. But again,
So it's
but
fine.
just to correct you, it absolutely, and not to like I know you probably didn't mean it, just so like it absolutely
Yeah.
was his fault. But
Yeah.
there's a difference between it. People think it's weird when you can say someone is both a victim and a perpetrator of something, and that doesn't make sense to
No.
people. Um, that doesn't make sense to people. They're like, how is that? How you have to be one or the other, right? You have to be a good guy or a bad guy. It's like
Right.
a victim or a oppressor. It's like no, that's not how. That's why these institutions are so they're so difficult because you can both be victimized by an institution and perpetuate it, and that's the cycle, and it's just that's why it's so
Yeah.
hard to break because you don't know whether to should I be empathetic to your to and understand why you're doing this, or should I condemn you for doing it, and can we do both? And I think there is a way to do both. um
Yeah, no, I agree. I worded that, but I do agree with you that there is a like you can be hurt and do the hurting at the
yeah.
same time.
Yeah, I just wanted to
I
make sure you
think
didn't feel like it. I wanted you to know that I think like yeah, it's still, um, yeah, that's like don't like I didn't know if it was maybe like that sort of like the party that's still like oh it to kind of give the benefit of the doubt in a way. It's like no, it's still bad, and he
yeah.
still should be condemned for it. But there isn't a level of understanding of um why did this happen? Not condoning it, to just to understand the full picture.
Yeah, no, I understand. And like thank you cuz I do still like cuz like I still talk to some family who's in it and they said some toxic things to me since leaving. So I'm still kind of like in this weird space where like I'm out. I don't want to be part of it, but things will still make me be like, but they're not like all bad. You know what I mean? So it's so I thank you for telling me that because it was good to hear. Then um um I think I guess that is something. So like when I left officially, although I kind of had been out a while before that. I was seeing someone secretly who, like, I'm now married to, and that's nice. He's nice. But
Congratulations.
thank you. But I told my dad, and I was like, I know, like, this means that, like, I can't be your daughter anymore. And it was like this thing, but he was very nice, and he was like, I'll always love you, and like, I don't care, like, I'll always talk to you. And that was like, okay, that's really good to hear. But then, like, I would get messages from family. Like, my uncle ended up messaging me, like, I know, like, you got this man, and he says he loves you, and that's all you ever wanted. And I was so confused by that because this man literally raised me. We, like, helped raise me. We talked a lot. And, like, I had already, like, I never even thought I wasn't a good enough witness, wife, or nice enough or meek, and I wasn't good enough to get married. So I had even, like, pushed that out of my mind. So when he said, like, I know that's all you ever wanted, I was like, wow, like, I've never been seen in my own family before. Um, it was just really weird.
Yeah, I'm sorry to
Cool
hear
thing.
that. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to our last conversation about how
Yeah.
he was saying um, that is a form of emotional abuse in a sense. It's like that they are using your ties and your love for your family members and your friends to manipulate you. Like, they'll say shit like, "Oh, you don't want to disappoint your friends. You don't want
Yeah.
to." And what's so shitty is, like, if they truly love you, if they truly care for you, and like your father, it showed. If they truly love you, they'll recognize you're doing what's best for you and support you. They won't try to use their love to manipulate you into doing certain things. To fall back. So, what was it that made you decide to? I don't know if it was like if you were able to. What led to you deciding to leave, or how did you leave? Did you move to a different
So
city, or?
yeah, no, I moved states. I grew up in California, and like I was in like my circuit or district of Jehovah's Witnesses was very like it's so weird. There will be people spread out like all over your district of California, but it's still kind of like this small town mentality where like you get a reputation and
Mm-hmm.
like you're really well known. So I was like, I didn't know anybody outside of the world. I just happened to join a Discord and met people, and I was like, oh wow, like worldly people aren't that bad. We can be friends. And then I met um my husband, but I had wanted to leave from like kind of a young age. Like I never felt like a lot of people, and I don't know, it might just be that their like rhetoric, it just sabotages you to just like want to leave in a way that they don't mean. But like the way they talked about it was like you're gonna like feel God in your heart all the time, and I never felt that. I was like, I don't feel what you're supposed to feel, so I guess God just he's not particularly interested in me. So like I would like to leave if I
Wow.
can get my stuff together to get out.
And I wonder how many people were kind of in the same boat as you, and that they didn't really feel what they thought they were supposed to be feeling, but they didn't want to become alienated from their family. So they basically said like, yeah, I feel it, even if it, but they don't want to be ostracized from their friends and family, and so they just kind of stayed with it. They just lied and said, yeah, this is I feel
Yeah.
this, or yeah.
I wonder that a lot. Like there were people that like I was it's so weird. They really want you to just only want to get married as like your life goal, because I had a friend and he was really cool. We had a lot of similar interests. We hung out all the time. But then and like he kind of knew, like we talked openly, and like he knew I wasn't really like in it like you're supposed to be in it. And I knew that he wasn't either. But then he like found a proper woman, and he
A
like
proper woman
yeah,
who kept
like
their mouth shut, didn't say anything, went with the
like
flow.
she was really sweet, but like but she was like on paper like what a witness man wants, kind of
Mm-hmm.
a thing. And I remember he even like called me out at like we were at this thing, and he was like, a brother said something that really meant a lot to me, and he's like looking at me the whole time, and he's like, if you're not living how Jehovah wants you to be living, you are like sticking a needle in his eye. And I was like,
It's dramatic as fuck.
I'm,
Shit.
yeah, like I'm sticking Jehovah God all the way up there in his eye because I just would like to be myself, like being like since I was 4, I was like a real queer kid. Like I had crushes on everybody, I was pan like since I was like born. I just was like, oh, but like that's not it. I'll just like the boys because that's like the straight thing to do. And that's so the other things don't matter. But then also like just like there were things that I just like didn't believe in like the text, like just some things the way they were written just didn't like hit how I think they were supposed to. Like and this kind of relates to like the whole thing, but like we were talking a little bit ago about the story of Dinah, and they really like victim blame her a lot in the story. Like she it was her family and the Canaanites, but because she was friends with them, that's why she got raped. Even though the way it's written, like, sorry, I don't know if like that's bad to say on a thing, but
I think it's in the context. I think it's fine. Well,
okay.
I'm looking it up right now. So what? I'm not familiar with this tale.
Okay,
So
so okay, so basically the whole thing is a warning example for women. So Dinah was the daughter, like the only daughter I think Jacob had. I don't know.
mhm.
And so she used to go and like he moved to they were traveling at this time or whatever. So he goes to Canaan and he moves there. And so it's basically like her family and Canaan people, which they don't worship the true God, so they're bad. But it's like she just went to town and like visited with like the local people and was like, hi, I'm Dinah. And then this guy, Shechem, comes in and he sees her and he wants her. And then it says, they always say that he abused her, but it's like, it just never read like that. It just seems like she like had a premarital hookup because after it happened, well, they also in like in my version of the Bible that we grow, and she doesn't say a word the whole time. It just narrates what happened to her, so I don't know her stance in this. But
Well, that must mean that she wanted it, right? Because she didn't scream
yeah,
or yell or say
yeah. So
no.
she did, and then after it happens, he comes to Jacob, her dad, and he's like, "I love Dinah. I'm all about her. What do I have to do to marry her?" And then Jacob's kind of like he's trying to like he's like, okay, yeah, like I don't know if they had dowries or that, but he's trying to like negotiate a deal over her. Meanwhile, her brothers are like really mad about it. So then they are like, you want to marry our sister Dinah, right? If you do, you're gonna have to be like us. So you need to get circumcised, and not just you, your whole like household or something. And then he's like, okay, yeah, I want to make this work with Dinah. I'll do anything to be with her. So he does that, and then they kill all of them, and all of that was Dinah's fault. The whole story was Dinah's fault.
That's like yeah, it's like victim blaming like the show, the movie. It's like holy
Yeah,
hell.
yeah,
Like god damn it.
and I got really like I kind of got like obsessed with that. Like the witnesses make a whole movie based on it. How can I make real friends? Like if you go on, you can just watch the whole thing, and like they don't go like into like essay or anything because like it's we still want to keep it like PG a little bit, but it was really weird how just like even if it like I don't know, just all these stories are just so
Well,
like I don't know.
it's really weird because it's strange how like we were talking about how, certain even not for non-theists, um
Right.
these attitudes can permeate. And it's amazing how the reason this story is like told like that is like it's the point of view of the storyteller, the person who has is writing the story doesn't think there's anything wrong. They think, oh, of course this is her fault. It's like there's no like
Right.
self-awareness there. It's like, oh, this is of course it is, because this is how it is. It's always women's fault. And it's sort of how that's permeated even to today, even all these years later, the centuries later, how it's not sometimes people, and it's not like a conscious thing. It's not like, oh, what were you wearing, or like, why didn't you say this? And they're not asking it in a way that is sometimes, they're not asking it to be bad faith. They're not asking it to try um to get like a gotcha. It's just like, it's
Mm.
almost like an unconscious attitude of,
Right.
oh, well, you must have done something, right? If you were walking home alone at night and you were drunk, you're being irresponsible, this horrible thing that happened to you, it's almost like it somehow needs to be your fault, at least partially. Like, I'm not condoning what that guy did, but it has to be your fault too, right? And that
Yeah.
like attitude towards women is so pervasive. Again, not even
Mm-hmm.
throughout the the Christian faith or Jehovah, whatever, just in general throughout our society. Like, not even for
Right.
non-theists, people still kind of have that. It's internalized to such an extent that it just pops up, even if you don't mean to. Even if it's just sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like in the dating video, I talked about how um, every time I see a story of like, say, like a female teacher and a young boy, I I know that's rape. I know that is assault. I know that this is a victim and
Mm-hmm.
his rapist. But it's like my mind is so conditioned to, I still have like that thought in my head of like, wow, like, oh man, lucky, that would be awesome. And it's like there's two different people in my head. I'm like, who the fuck is saying, why am I thinking that? I feel like so guilty for even letting that cross my mind. But these attitudes are so pervasive, and like
Yeah.
within the book, it like, this isn't just like a thing that's like in the last like 10 years or 20 years. Like, this is like these are attitudes that have existed for, in some cases, thousands of years. And it's
Right.
just and now we're in a space where we're trying to push back against them, but we're pushing back against hundreds, if not thousands, of years of these attitudes just being perpetuated and just internalizing in people and throughout society. It's just, how do you fight against that in any productive manner?
Right. It's really hard to just like, I don't know, come to grips with just like how like, because like you grow up hearing like, oh well, like, this is the only place where you'll be loved, but then at the same time like everything is on you. Like like, I don't know, my fam like my family, there was like an adultery scandal that happened at one point that was like a whole thing. Um but it was still like people talked about it. Like my parents, like the problem, like you're not allowed to get divorced when you're a Jehovah's Witness, and like my parents would have been better off if they could have just been divorced like years ago, and like that would have been fine. Um, but it was still weird. Like there was this whole like thing of where my mom was the victim, but it was still her fault. Like, oh well, he cheated on you, but like, what were you doing?
There
Like,
it is.
it takes like, so like, oh, I feel so bad. That's so awful that that happened to you. But like, how can you like improve in this?
It's like,
This is a teachable moment.
again, if like, oh, I'm divorcing my husband because he is cheating on me, or like being abusive to me. It's like, oh well, you're not being a good wife.
Mhm.
It's I'm initiating a divorce because my husband is being lazy in our marriage and he's not like attending to our child. It's like, oh well, why did you marry a guy like that then?
Mhm.
I'm a single mother because my husband ran out on me, didn't want to take care of his child. It's like, well, why'd you sleep with a guy like that? Why you
Yeah.
should have chose better. And it's always this knee-jerk reaction to, it has to be in some way your fault. And
Yeah.
the ironic thing is, especially like I'm sure whether it's in um, religion or like, I hear a lot of this in like, red pill rhetoric too. It's always, if something happens where a guy's in a bad position, like let's say like
Right.
something bad happens, or like you said, like the guy who um the husband who like does the pyramid scheme and does a
Right.
second murder in the
Yeah.
house. oh, it's not your fault because other people didn't give you the right information. So it's never your
Right.
fault. It's just
Yeah.
nothing. It's always you're always a victim of circumstance. Whereas women, in your case, it's
Mhm.
always you had a hand in it, and that is such a
Yeah.
terrible. Ugh, it's just disgusting.
Yeah, it's so weird like how, and it's also because like they'll talk and like they'll be like, men, we are strong and all this like weird, really weird toxic masculine stuff, and they like guy like it'll be a speaker at a podium to the crowd. You'll hear a lot of men go, "Mm-hmm, yep." But then meanwhile, it's like we have the most like fragile um men still have these really fragile egos that need to be taken care of, and you need to be quiet and speak without a word. That's like they say that a lot, and it's just a really weird um notion to like, okay, but like I thought the man was like this strong leader, the head of the household thing, but these women are just also, I don't know, it's so weird. Someone in the chat asked like what do women get out of dating, and like you get to be married basically. There's like if you can be like an elder's wife or something, you're like have like a place of power almost. Um in a way, like but over other women. Like you're still not going to mean anything to a man, but like you can sort of lord that position over women. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like it's it's interesting too because it kind of goes back to like that sort of like self awareness thing, um, in the sense of if um I'm a strong man and protector, so if something wrong happens in my life, it can't be my fault because then I would have to maybe admit or recognize that maybe I have to improve in some areas. No, no, no. It must be everyone else's fault. The reason I can't get laid is sorry, like moving off of the topic. The reason I can't
Right.
get laid isn't because I refuse to like work on things that I have control over. It's because women are hypergamous sluts and they only want to fuck Chad. And
Right.
it just that sort of mentality extends to so much, and it's just and it's like we because like you said, it's like it's wrapped up in this idea of you can't you can't recognize that like if you're not meeting that ideal level of like masculinity, instead of figuring out ways to reach it or improving yourself or reframing it for younger men,
Right.
it's that I need to find other reasons as to why I'm not measuring up because it can't be my fault because then I'm a failure. It must be everyone else's fault. And in this
Yeah.
case, it with like Jehovah's Witness, it almost sounds like it's an entire culture based around these men who don't ever want to feel like their masculinity is being put in question, and so they
Hmm.
basically condition women from a young age to always to jump on their sword. So whenever something goes wrong,
Right.
it's your fault. It's not our fault because we're men and we're strong. It's
Hmm.
always your fault. If something goes wrong, if you're uncomfortable, if you're upset, it's your problem. It's not our problem. It's your problem.
Yeah. No, I saw that someone in the chat, like, sorry, just for one last thing about like the dinosaurs. Someone in the chat mentioned like how like in the Bible like their dad does curse the brothers for doing that. But like I remember a talk about this whole thing where it was still Dinah's fault because Jacob's like, oh my gosh, like you killed all these people who are important. Like they're gonna be really mad at us. We need to like flee now or something. And then it's like, but that's still Dinah's fault
Yeah,
that her brothers
it's
can't handle. Like they killed a bunch of people, but like, nah,
it's
it's
also
fine.
like people. It's like it seemed it just from like the way you described it. It almost sounds like it's misdirected. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm mad at you, not because you're shaming your sister, but because you are like you killed people and now they're gonna come back and hurt me. Like it's not
Yeah.
like Dinah isn't even it's ironic. It's like this. It's called the story of Dinah, and yet she's basically a prop in the story. It's something that like it's
Yes.
not even her story. It's the like terrible events that happen to her that are inflicted upon her. Like
Hmm.
that's not someone's story. That's such a reductive way
Yeah.
of thinking of things like that.
Yeah, no, like there are so many like just all of them are, it's, I don't even know like what, like, I'm not really religious anymore. Like, I'm just not like for organized religion as a whole after my upbringing. But like, I honestly have no idea what I know or think I know about the Bible, because the more I look at each story and I just remember like how it was taught in Jehovah's Witnesses, they really like they have a very specific lesson that they want you to take away from it. So like they'll rearrange things however they need to for their weird, like they also like they don't want, like, if you go to college you're like looked down on for that. And it's just like all these things come back to um like I've like even like I remember someone even used the story of Dinah to talk about like wanting more. Like, you know, she was like they made up, like, it's not like the text is pretty straightforward, like she made friends, like got taken advantage of, they did a kill. But someone like added this stuff, like, you know, she probably was going there and like seeing like how these women wore jewelry and she wanted
If
jewelry too.
if she wasn't covetous, if she was just happy with with what she was given, then this wouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah.
There's always a way, and that sounds very similar to that whole thing about, I think we were talking about in the last caller. Women initiate 80% of divorces, but instead of like breaking that down and actually looking into it, it's like, oh well, that's because women just always want something better and they're never satisfied. It's like, no, that's not what that says. It's you adding that. It's you taking your preconceived notions of women, your toxic
Right.
generalizations of them, and adding that to the context. Like that is nowhere in this narrative. You're taking it and projecting it onto it. And that's
Yeah.
just, yeah. Well, it sounds like, I know we have to wrap up. I've
Yeah.
I've made you go through a lot. So thank you for sharing. I know sorry if any of that was difficult or uncomfortable, but thank you for sharing. I think it's important to highlight these things. But I'm very glad. It sounds like you're in a better place. It sounds like you're with someone who loves you, and I think we're all thankful for that.
Yeah, no, like I was really happy to talk about. I've never really like shared this really. Like I'm kind of like after I saw that video and reached out to you, that was the first time I ever like thought about talking about this anywhere. So I'm just glad that, you know, you had me on to talk, and like it'd be fun to do it again sometime or whatever.
Yeah, and of course, when you're ready, if not to like push you or anything to discuss,
Yeah.
like, because you've already some of the stuff like that creepy dude, like shit, man, like just
Really creepy, sorry.
yeah. But if it's hard to if it's hard to like revisit it, of course. But I think you're helping a lot of people understand that this is an issue. Like this isn't just like a few bad apples. This is a much deeper problem that happens to men and women who are sort of like who are consumed by these cultures who convince them it's
Yeah.
for their best interest, but in actuality it's doing them no good. It's putting them in a lot of danger and just trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I know like this call is a lot more about like dating specifically, but I'd love to come on another time and talk about like different aspects or something, you know, eventually down the line whenever.
And we'd love to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, for sure. See you later.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.